Before we get started, please remember this podcast is for general educational purposes only. We're not providing medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult your own healthcare provider about your care. Welcome to Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. 2 nurses, 1 mic, no bullshit.
I'm Ashley LaRue, fertility nurse and founder of Fertility.
And I'm Laura Wepler, fertility nurse and founder of Navigating Fertility with Laura.
You got questions, the internet has a lot of opinions, but what you really need is 2 fertility nurses who aren't afraid to tell the truth.
No scripts, no sugarcoating, just honest, evidence-based nurse-to-nurse conversation. So let's get into it.
Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. Laura and I are super excited to be with you this week, but we are even more excited to be joined by a very special guest in a very important week in the fertility community. So when this airs, it is going to be National Infertility Awareness Week. And we are so honored to be joined by Barb Collura, who is the founder of Vital Voices Consulting, the former president and CEO of Resolve, which is a role she served for 18 years. She is a policy and advocacy leader and expert for fertility and all things family building. So, Barb, we are so excited to have you on here, and we are so looking forward to this conversation.
Well, Ashley and Laura, I'm thrilled to be here. And, I love to talk about this field. I love to talk about advocacy. And that was what you wanted to talk about too. So it's perfect. So thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So this week's episode, everybody, we're talking about advocating for your fertility, and what you need to know, what patients need to know. We're going to get into what healthcare professionals, specifically in the fertility community, needs to know, and how we can all advocate for a better fertility future for those navigating it. So to kick things off, Barb, I would love to hear kind of how you got started in this. Like, you've obviously spent decades working in this field. What brought you to it?
Well, I had my own infertility journey. My husband and I went through IVF treatments. We live here in the Washington, D.C. area, and we were fortunate that we had a little bit of health insurance at the time. My husband worked in the high-tech field. And so when we were told that IVF is really the only option that we had, we moved in that direction. And I went into it, quite honestly, with eyes wide open. I told a lot of people. I didn't really know that I shouldn't be telling people. I didn't really know anybody who was going through it. I had one friend, but she lived in another state. So, and then it didn't work. And I got really depressed, and I had some dear friends kind of do an intervention and say, you need help. You need to get some professional help. And I found a therapist through an online infertility board way back in the day. This is in the late 1990s, so a long time ago. And through her, this mental health provider who I saw every single week for a year, she told me about Resolve, and she said, you need to get involved. And I did. I started becoming, as a patient. So I was a consumer, if you will, of Resolve services here in the Washington, D.C. area. And through that relationship with Resolve, I met amazing people and volunteers. But I also learned a lot about what our options were. And my husband and I made the decision to build our family through international adoption. My son is 25, and he was born in Guatemala. And so I feel like my story is really more my mental health journey than it is my adoption journey, because that was where I sat every week with this therapist. And I learned so much. And then I wanted to really give back to Resolve. I became a volunteer. I volunteered for 4 years. And then the organization moved their national headquarters from the Massachusetts, actually they were in Boston area, to the Washington, D.C. area. And that was in 2004. And I joined the staff. in 2004. And then in 2007, I became the president and CEO. So I had this very strong attachment as a patient to the organization, to the mission, and loved what we did. But I didn't come at it as this, nonprofit women's health professional. And here I was 18 years at the organization until mid 2025. So
Wow.
my heart has always been as a patient advocate.
I love that so much. Thank you for sharing. I know, I think it's so powerful when people share their history and that they've been through the fertility journey. And I noticed you're wearing a shirt and I think it says does it say 1 in 6? Yeah. And I'm curious, because, I feel like we're still in this place where fertility is, even despite online, we're still so quiet about it. I think people still feel like somehow they're the only ones going through the journey. And I imagine back when you were navigating it, like the internet, right, wasn't what it is now. I imagine it felt even more isolating at that time. And so can you kind of speak to that experience and maybe what you've seen, how that's grown, like the discussion of fertility and challenges over the years?
There's two things when I get asked that question, there's two things that really jump out at me. One was personal and one was at Resolve in those early days. I remember, as I said, I was, for whatever reason, I was really open about my infertility, and I would be in work settings and I would say, oh, I'm going to be out in a couple weeks because I'm doing IVF. And I did my IVF at the Jones Institute down in Norfolk. So I had to go out of town, this kind of thing. And I just was explaining TMI, explaining to people, why I was going to be out, and everyone would go, and then the meeting would end and I would get somebody calling me, a woman pulling me aside. And then they were saying, I'm going through this, or I just went through this, or I might need to do this. And I'm like, why did you say anything in the meeting? And they're like, oh my God, of course not. So, so that was really the environment. Even if somebody was talking about it, you didn't lean in. You kind of did that privately. And then actually I have three experiences. The second one was I did Resolve's Advocacy Day before I was on the staff. So this is, think of like 2002, 2003. There were literally like 25 of us. And so there was a woman who lives here in Northern Virginia, and she's and I are teamed up together, and we're traipsing all over Capitol Hill together. And she's telling her story to staffers, and she's, very outgoing. And she says to me, my parents, my siblings, my in-laws, none of them know that I'm going through infertility treatments. And I go, you just told your senator, you just told your US congressman. And she's like, yeah, but I can't tell my family. And I was like, my head exploded. Like, I was like, I can't like reconcile that. You're very open and advocating, and yet in your own she goes, well, these people don't know me, and nobody in my world knows that, nobody in my world knows I'm going through this. So that was the environment. So then I get to Resolve, and we're a nonprofit, right? You have your brand, you have your name, and at the time, we did a lot of mailings in the mail, and we got feedback that the return address could not say Resolve the National Infertility Association, which is our name. And at the time, that was the name. And we got feedback from people all over the country that said, stop putting the name in the return address. My mailman will see it. I have a shared mailbox in my apartment building. I don't want anybody to know I'm getting mail from an infertility organization. So can you imagine, like, you're trying to build a brand and now you're being told mask the name because I don't want people to know. So that gives you a sense of both the personal, like how people were feeling about it, as well as now we're running an organization and what we had to deal with.
Yeah. Do you think it's really obviously it's gotten better. I think more people are speaking out about it. I think social
100%.
media has helped with the getting the voice out more. But there
Yeah.
is still this perceived shame, for lack of a better word, about navigating a fertility
Right.
journey. I mean,
Yeah.
why do we still think that is?
I think because there's still so many people that don't understand what infertility is. There's still, you're talking about reproduction, you're talking about private things,
Yeah.
and so it's so much better. You're right, Ashley. It's so much better, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And so why is that? Generational. There's still people who are going to say, "What did you do? Why did you cause this?" And
Yeah.
and so plus, who wants to answer a lot of really private, conversations about their testicles or their, fallopian
Yeah.
tubes and, whatever their cervical mucus. These are not things that a
Yeah.
lot of us like to talk about. And so sometimes it's just easier to I'm just not going to tell anybody. And I'll tell you one more thing. As somebody who did tell people, and then I had failure after failure after failure. By the time I did, I think my last transfer, I didn't tell anybody because I couldn't handle
Yeah.
emotionally going back to all those people and say, I failed, didn't work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think there's some of that where it's too hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. How do you think, so for that specific type of community, for those who aren't wanting to share, or they have shared and now they're at the point where like, I'm done sharing. I don't want to share anymore. I'm tired, I'm exhausted. There's a lot going on. I don't have time for that. I think people think of advocacy and they think like I'm not in I'm not in the government. Like, how can I advocate, especially when I'm not speaking up about it or I don't feel comfortable about it? How do we make advocacy easy? What are some like easy tips and things that people can do, especially for those who maybe aren't talking about it as loudly as maybe others?
This is such a great question, and I'm so glad you asked it, but I'm going to answer it in a way that anybody listening, whether you're a healthcare professional, whether you work in this field, maybe you're a pharma rep or something, and of course, a patient or somebody who loves somebody who's going through this, I'm going to answer it the same way. The most important thing about advocacy is telling your story.
Yeah.
The most important thing. And I don't want you to think about advocacy with a capital A. Advocacy is a small a as well. And what I mean by that is advocacy can be telling your friends and family. Advocacy can be telling the people at your office, at your work, the HR people, if the benefits don't meet your needs. Advocacy can be anything you want it to be, but it's about telling your story. When we think about advocacy with a capital A, going to your lawmakers, going to your state capital, coming to Washington, D.C., your story is all that matters. Your story is all that matters. Now, there's tips on how to tell your story in an impactful way, but at the end of the day, whether you're a healthcare provider, whether you're somebody working in this space, where you're a patient, you see what's going on. And this is the best way I like to think about advocacy, which is the policy side, is ask yourself, wherever you are in this field, are you satisfied with the status quo?
Yeah.
Are you satisfied with the status quo? If you're not, then advocate, right? If you think everything is great and it all works smoothly and all is good, then guess what? You don't need to advocate. But I can tell you, as somebody who's been a patient advocate since the early 2000s, the status quo is still not acceptable. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't want to leave that legacy, right? How can we make it better for the next nurse, for the next doctor, for the next embryologist, for the next patient? How do we improve this process, this medical field? And you could slice and dice that in a million different ways, but how do we make it better? So there you go. It's really
Yeah.
about telling your story. Don't worry about, I don't know how bills are made. Don't worry about that. Just start by telling your story.
I love that so much. I think it's so powerful to be able to share your story and let others know they aren't alone, because again, to your shirt, 1 in 6, and I think it's 1 in 5 in the United States, right? It's like 1 in 6
Well,
worldwide, 1 in 5.
worldwide, the WHO came out with the 1 in 6, and that's sort of what everybody has really leaned into is that data, because it was one of the first times that the WHO really did some good numbers. There's a ton left out. So for all we know, it's more prevalent than that, and in some countries it is. Those are the numbers that we go with.
Yeah. I always tell people, everybody knows somebody, whether you know that you know them, right? You've interacted with someone who's been on this journey.
100%.
Yeah. I would love to hear a little bit about your time at Resolve. And like, obviously there's advocacy at the level that you just spoke about, but then there's advocacy at the level of legislation and our government. And obviously we're at a really big point in our government history right now where, I'm almost like, are we seeing things shift back in a negative way? But I would love to hear some of the wins and some of the things that you've been able to accomplish or were able to accomplish during your time at Resolve, and the wins that you had, or even some of the losses that you had.
Yeah, what a really an honor to kind of answer that question. I had a recent post on LinkedIn where I said advocacy is a team sport. And, I want to be sure that your listeners hear that nothing that was really done, from an organization like Resolve or from an organization like ASRM is done in isolation. It's a team sport. So if you are listening to this and I have left a name out or somebody, my apologies, but I want to make it very, very clear of that. I am super proud of the states that passed laws mandating insurance coverage for IVF while I was at Resolve. At one point, I think it was like from 2019 to probably 2025 or so, we calculated that more than 60 million covered lives were added to receive IVF coverage. Those are in states that passed those laws. So I'm really, really, really proud of the work we did. I'm also extremely proud of a program that started when I was a CEO called Coverage at Work. And this was a program that our pharmaceutical partner at the time, EMD Serono, really helped spearhead. And that's another thing, how, again, it's a team sport, providers, pharmaceutical companies, nonprofits, all of us, how do we find the best of what we bring to the table and work together? Coverage at Work is about a bottom-up approach of getting more insurance coverage at employers. We didn't have the resources at Resolve to go CEOs. I couldn't go to the CEOs of every company around the country, but wow, we really inspired and trained people to go to their state capital to come to Washington. Why not walk down the hall to HR and advocate within your company? So we used some of those same tools and tactics and shifted it. Who you're at. Again, it's really about telling your story. It didn't matter that it wasn't a lawmaker or a staffer. It was somebody who handled benefits at a company. So I'm super proud of the millions of people that got coverage because somebody contacted Resolve. We had the resources. They made the ask. So those are the things, those are the wins that I look back at, and I'm really, really proud I was a part of those.
I think when you hear those kinds of numbers, like us that are just out there, like we're not privy to that so much, right? When you really think about all those years you spent, like there is a big impact that a lot of people don't even know you, other people, partners that you had made in that time period. To hear that level of number of coverage is huge. But then to also think there are still millions and millions of people that don't still have coverage. It is it is just mind-boggling to me to have that level of impact, but to still be so far away from where we should be when
Oh
it
my
comes from an
gosh.
insurance perspective or a mandate perspective.
Yeah.
You said it, Ashley. I mean, yeah, I could sit here and go, woo, that was amazing. We did so much work. We did so much great work. 100%. I don't want to take anything away from that. But you're absolutely right. Then I look at where I am today. I have to tell you guys this story. I don't even know how long ago this was. I don't know, 10, 12, maybe even 15 years ago. We got this, I think it was started off like a post on Facebook, and then it like exploded. And then I had like a 2-hour phone call with this woman. Here's the story. She's in a state without an IVF. I know what state it is. I'm not going to say it.
Sure.
It does not have an IVF mandate. For whatever reason, it's one of the, because there's only like 20 some, right? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of other states. She woke up one day, found out she has infertility, found out she needs IVF, found out her great insurance from her employer doesn't cover it, found out by a couple of searches that, wow, the state next to me has an IVF mandate. The state over here does. There are some other states that have amazing IVF insurance. Her communication to Resolve was, where the hell have you been? How come I don't have IVF insurance? And she said, you've been around since 1974. What have you been doing? And as an organization, you get so caught up in like, talking about all the great things you've done. As a nonprofit, you have to constantly remind people of the impact you're making, and we're great. And then you get somebody who comes along and goes, you've been here since 1974. What the hell have you been doing? Because I don't have IVF insurance in my state.
Humbles you quick.
And I just thought, oh my God. And so instead of like, I don't know why we didn't have IVF in her state, right? It's a million reasons why, but the point is that she's right. She has a right to be angry and upset and feel, what the hell, right? And so we still have 25 plus states that don't have any kind of coverage. So think about that every day. There's people in those states today, tomorrow, next week being told you need something like IVF to have a child. And then you're like, what the hell? Why don't we have any kind of insurance? So I say that because there's so much still to do.
So much still to do. And I think that like patients obviously feel very helpless on what they can do in those states. And I think there's a fear I've heard from even like I'm in Illinois, and I think Illinois is like one of the best, has some of the best coverage for fertility. But I've even had people express to me fear that in this current political environment that we're actually going to see loss of benefits. Or I had someone express to me they thought that there was going to be loss of IVF as a whole. And then I think about the Alabama ruling, and I think about, the things, Roe v. Wade being overturned, and like the direction, are we headed backwards? I would love your thoughts on this.
Well, we have a lot. I don't think that's I don't think that's a one sentence answer.
Sure.
Because there are absolutely forces, powerful, well-funded forces who do not like IVF.
Yeah.
And they are really smart. I remember Sean Tipton, he's head of policy at ASRM. He's like, I hate it when our enemies are super smart and well-funded. I mean, you always think the people who don't agree with you must not be as smart as you. But in this case, they're pretty damn smart. So they are finding new and creative ways to look like they're leaning in to fertility treatments and support for patients. Who doesn't want to look like they're supporting patients and people to build their family, but steering it in a different direction. And so that's a little, in my opinion, a little sneaky and a little, it's also pretty smart. The message of IVF is bad, it hasn't resonated. And the polling across the country, no matter who's doing the polling, shows overwhelmingly Americans support IVF. And so figuring out another way to chip away at IVF is needed. But, there are a lot of things that could reduce benefits. It could be the economy. It could be employers cutting back on generous benefits. It could be people shifting from covering medical treatments for IVF and just saying, we're going to give you $10,000 and for family building and figure out how you want to use it. And so those are all kinds of things that could conspire to really reduce the coverage. And then I do think that you're going to see perhaps coverage, but it's going to have a lot of caveats on it. It might be you have to look a certain way. You have to be in a certain kind of relationship. You might have to have a marriage license or not. You might have to not be able to freeze embryos. So there's a multitude of ways that this can be done that can start reducing access. And we've already seen it in things like fertility preservation, where states like Texas and Kentucky, passed fertility preservation insurance laws. This means that if you have some sort of medical condition and that treatment for that medical condition is going to make you infertile, right? You're not infertile today, but you need this medical intervention, medication, surgery, think radiation, chemotherapy. That's going to actually impact your future fertility, right? So we want you to freeze your eggs, freeze your sperm, and preserve your fertility so that you can build a family after. Well, we already have seen in those states, they pass that kind of insurance law, but it's very restrictive. It's only for cancer patients. What about sickle cell? What about endometriosis? What about other things? Right now, it's just cancer. So we've already started to see that, and payers can do that. Payers can say, hey, we're going to cover this, but you have to fit into this box.
Not along the same lines, but a touchy subject out there. Just talking about really quickly Alabama and what happened there. And we don't have to get into the ins and outs of, I think a lot of people, at least if you're in the community, we can talk about that. But like, what do people do in those instances? People that live in that state, or, is it possible to reverse something like that? Or how do you advocate in a state like that it is very adamant and passing things that are not IVF friendly in the slightest? And that's putting it very lightly.
I'm going to sound like a broken record. I mean, I was on the ground. I was super close to the advocates, and I still am, in Alabama, and saw firsthand, what they did and what worked. And there was a lot of things that were happening, and I'm sure, I just know, I know a lot of different things were going on, but I know it from the patient side. Those personal stories were incredibly impactful. And what the lawmakers, it was a Supreme Court, the Alabama Supreme Court made a decision, and the clinics in Alabama interpreted it to mean that any harm that would come to an embryo could put them in tremendous risk. And so the legislature had nothing to do with it. And so the clinics paused actively doing embryo transfers and, freezing embryos and so forth. They didn't touch them. And the legislature had to get involved. Just so happened that in Alabama, the state legislature was in session. If this had happened in like September, October, they wouldn't have been. So immediately you look to the legislative branch to say the judicial branch has done something, and we need to fix that. And so it was those stories and those lawmakers realizing, what? The IVF is about like having family and making babies. And do I want to be the lawmaker that prevents that from happening? And so I think, I think at its core, it was the patients. I was there the day we had our advocacy day. I spoke at it. I was very honored to be there. There were hundreds of people. And I talked to a huge number of them. Why are you here? And they were so outraged that they took off work. They came to Mobile. Most of them had never been in the state capitol except like in 5th grade for its field trip. These weren't advocates. they weren't trained. They just got messages and saw things on social media and said, hell yeah, I'm going to show up on February 28th. And so I wanted to say, though, that you said this is National Infertility Awareness Week. I want to make a comment and say this is 2026, April of 2026. If you ask the advocates in Alabama how they feel about the current state of affairs, if you ask fertility doctors in Alabama, they will tell you that they are not done. They will tell you that there is more work to be done in Alabama. So please, if you are listening to this, don't let anyone tell you that we're all good in Alabama, because we are not. Yeah. And there is still work to be done. And the process for doing that is a constitutional amendment. Because of the way the state constitution is written in Alabama, that gave that Supreme Court the opportunity to do what they did. So they want to fix the state constitution. So it's like, go big. But I tell you that had it not been for those people, I will tell you one other story. There was a lawmaker, and I heard this from a lobbyist, that felt like the best way to make this happen in Alabama was to pit the providers against the patients. Clearly, this was somebody didn't understand the IVF process. Can you imagine, you guys are nurses and saying, we're going to go up against all the patients. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh my God.
And those lawmakers showed up that day to work, and we were outside of their office building. And we were on, like, if you will, the front lawn of their office building. And they saw all the doctors up there and nurses in their white coats. And they saw all the patients in their orange t-shirts working together. And they went, uh-oh, okay, we got to solve this. And I want everyone to hear that. Patients, providers, if you call it industry, whatever you call it, working together has to be the case over and over and over. If you are a provider, if you are a physician, if you're an embryologist and you're saying, Barb, it looks self-serving for me to advocate, I don't want to be out front. I can tell you right now, please, you've got to have a different mindset. You must be at the table. Your patients want you there. Lawmakers want you there. As advocacy leaders, you must be there. That's where we're at right now. Is our entire field needs to be advocating.
Yeah. I think that's a really good segue into kind of talking about what you're doing now. And I would love to hear you kind of talk about, we've talked a lot about patient advocacy. We talked a lot about, one voice, one story makes a huge difference. And it doesn't have to be the capital A advocacy. It can be the small a advocacy. I think these are huge, very doable points that a lot of our patients listening can take home. But can you explain a little bit more about what you're currently doing and getting more into exactly what you're talked about, getting more of companies and industry leaders and healthcare providers and REIs and nurses like us into the conversation and working together?
Well, I had a front row seat to all these advocacy endeavors for the last 20 years. And gosh, when it worked really, really well, like if you said, oh God, what was the, like, think in your head of when everything went right, everything went well, what was going on? And I keep going back to, it was everybody coming together. It was providers, it was pharmaceutical companies, genetic testing companies, like everybody coming together and working together and having a strategy and a plan, and then really working that. And so, so what I'm doing now is, yes, I've been a patient advocate, and yes, that's where my heart is. But I have to tell you, there's too many companies and people that are just sitting this out. They're just not engaged in advocacy in any way, shape, or form. They're just not. And we have the pharmaceutical companies in this space that are very engaged. They have professional staff, they have lobbyists all over. They're kudos. They're doing it right. They're doing it well. But there's not many others that are. And so I want to inspire CEOs. I want to inspire companies. I want to inspire employees. I want to inspire physicians to advocate. ASRM is really a great organization if you're a provider, if you're at like a genetic testing company, if you're at a pharmacy, if you're in one of these many startups, you know, you're an app, you're femtech, any of the benefit companies in this space, there's nobody really organizing you. There's nobody that's like speaking for you. And that's not a bad thing, but they're left out. And so I want to bring those folks along. I want to take them from some baby steps, maybe where they are today, to being far more engaged. I have to tell you, I'm really close to my congressman and the staff. And I was talking to the healthcare staffer for my congressman. Her name is Lauren. And I said to her, Lauren, what if I came to you and I had a piece of paper and I had the logos of 50 companies? And these were all companies that supported infertility and IVF and so forth. What would that do for you? She goes, that would be unbelievable. That would be amazing, because I only see the 3 pharmaceutical companies, and they're great, but I don't even know that there's anybody else out there. Can you imagine? Like,
why do we think that is? Why do we think that we aren't hearing more from, I mean, I feel like the startup world in the fertility space right now is huge.
100%.
Like, why are we not seeing more advocacy from, is it concern that they won't get funding? Like, I don't know.
You know, Laura, I sat there at Resolve and tried to get these people to show up for Advocacy Day, get them to do this, get them to do that, and some did. And there was a spark fire, you know, that would you know, launch, you get somebody excited. But that's really the nut I'm trying to crack, Laura, now, is why is that? And I am taking the approach of they may not understand how easy it is. They may not understand that this is that it's very approachable. I've heard some CEOs say to me, I don't have a budget for that. I can't hire any lobbyists. We don't have anybody on staff. Those are all legitimate reactions, but truthfully, they don't need any of that to be involved.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to approach it in a way that says this is accessible. And guess what? You are needed at the table. Can you imagine, Laura? You talked about all the startups in this space. Think about some of the people running those companies. They're kick-ass, right? I mean, they're amazing. Yeah. They're super smart. A lot of them are women. Oh my God, I want to get them to Capitol Hill, right? I want to get them to their state capitals. The innovation happening, you know, all of this kind of stuff. I just think lawmakers would be like, I didn't even know this was happening. And so I see that. And so I sat there and asked the same exact question that you did. Why? And at Vital Voices Consulting, my new firm, that's what I'm trying to solve for.
I love that. I I love that so much. I mean, I think even just, I remember, I think it actually was when the Alabama ruling went down. I was at a startup at the time, and we didn't put anything out on social. And I was like, guys, like, we need to be loud about this. And I don't know if it's just, again, like a fear thing. Actually, I think it was also when Roe v. Wade got overturned. And I just felt like that was a moment, right, where we all needed to be loud and we weren't. And that it was disappointing to say the least.
There's huge opportunity. And, I said at the beginning, are you satisfied with the status quo? And so if we truly want to solve some of these big advocacy issues, because there's patient support issues, there's issues at clinics, there's work shortage. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can decide where your passion is. My passion is getting more people access. And that's kind of what I know. I don't know how to run a clinic. So having solutions for making a clinic experience better is not necessarily something I'm good at. But I know what patients want, because Resolve asks patients that every single year. What do you want us to be doing? What is we didn't do advocacy because I liked it, because we thought that was fun. We did it because year after year after year, when we said to patients, what do you want us working on? What is the hardest thing? What's the one thing we could be doing? Get me health insurance. Make it easier for me to get care. Okay.
Yeah.
Laura and I hear all the time, because we work with, patients and clients in the space outside of the clinic, outside of, who they're working with. And there is a huge gap and a decline, I think, in overall patient experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's a gap between the policy world and patient experience. How do we close that? How does, what you're doing now, how does advocacy in general help to close not only getting, access, like you talked about, that's a big one, insurance, mandates, all those kind of things. Does that improve? I mean, obviously it improve the patient experience from some extent, but how do we close that gap from an experience standpoint in general? And I do think some of that starts with kind of what you're doing now with Vital Voices Consulting, is starting from the CEOs making those decisions, making, choices in the clinic to have resources for experience or whatever that may be. Could you speak a little bit more to that, or your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there is, I think it goes back to listening to both patients, listening to the folks that working in those clinics, all of us advocating. I'm sure there's somebody listening to this who feels like they have a story to tell, who feels passionate about something, but it may not be health insurance. It may not be, but it's something about the patient experience. It's something about how their clinic is operating. It's something about how the lab is being done. It's any number of things, because you're so close to it. You get it. You understand. You see the gaps, and you see, my gosh, there's an opportunity to fix this. I'm not satisfied with the status quo, right?
Yeah.
And so advocacy can be about, how do I make my voice heard? How do I present ideas and solutions, and or look at this and say, do we care? And it's kind of going back to the status quo. Do we care enough to solve this?
Yeah.
And fill in the blank, Ashley, on what that means. This patient experience, this dropout rate, this problem we have inside the clinic that's causing so much time and energy and burnout. Like, how do we fix this? And, a lot of us, let's be honest, it's easier to just go, what the hell? Like, I'm just going to go home at night. Somebody else can fix that. And I think this is where what I'm trying to do is really inspire people to use their voice and to make change happen. So it's not always, hey, Barb, I'm not really passionate about the whole health insurance thing, but there's this other aspect that really speaks to me. Great, right? If that's going to make your job better, if it's going to make the patient journey better, have at it. But I think we get complacent, and the status quo is enough.
Yeah.
I I think one of the trends that we're seeing in regards to this is somebody's not having a great experience at a clinic for whatever reason, insert whatever, like you talked about. I think instead of people feeling empowered to speak up or advocate for that specific thing, people are going to other, like, there's so many clinics out there now that we're seeing a lot of movement. We're seeing a lot of second opinions. We're seeing a lot of switching clinics. Which I think is really interesting. Now more than ever, I feel like a lot of people are like, well, if I'm not happy here, I'm just going to go somewhere else, which absolutely advocate if that's how you're advocating for yourself. But I think a missing piece is people feeling comfortable saying to that clinic, here's the reason why, here's what you were not providing, or you weren't listening to me, or I wasn't getting X, Y, and Z. And I think that invokes change to people making those decisions.
I've heard from, I mean, on that similar note, I've heard patients be turned away though from clinic managers like, well, if you don't like the way we do it, just go somewhere else. And that's so disheartening. I mean, I think like that speaks to why Ashley and I are doing this podcast. That speaks to like why we are so excited and passionate about raising our voices to make the patient experience better. Like you say, fill in the blank on advocacy. Like that's where I want to advocate. Like I want the patient experience to be different.
Yeah.
I would say, just like what we do in public policy, we start with data. We have stories and we have data. And if you are at a clinic and you're seeing some of these things, start with pushing for some data. Hey, how are we analyzing how many patients are coming in the door? What is happening to them? Where are they going? Where are they dropping out? What are the reasons? Are we actually reaching out to patients after a consult who we never see again? What are we finding? And all of those kinds of things where you're really digging deep into what's happening with a patient and being open for the data. Because let's be honest, if you don't collect the data in a really good granular way, things can look great. And, you know, you can say, we got great doctors, we're doing a great job. But you and I know that every practice can learn something from this kind of data. And so start with that. It's the same thing that we did at Resolve, that Resolve continues to do, that ASRM does, is gathering that data and then taking those patient stories and putting that together. And so whether it's, are we surveying patients? Are we looking at our online reviews? Are we leaning in to what we know is happening, and then filling in the blanks with what we don't know, and then taking a step back? What is this telling us? We have our online reviews, we have what they tell us, we have what the data shows. Wow. Are there opportunities for us to improve here? And I love that you two are where you sit. It's kind of like, I would say to people, I wish more like private equity or venture capital people were calling me, because the things I see and, you know, and it's like, I am sure you two see so much and hear so much, and you're just like, wow. Right? I see you both smiling and you're nodding your heads.
We talk about the
we talk about it.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, especially all the venture capital happening in the fertility space. And some of it's wonderful, but some of it makes me a little nervous that we're profit over experience, right? Like,
well, it's that, but it's also we see so much, and we see like, here's what you really need to be fixing, you know, and here's where you should be investing money. I mean, I don't want to go off on a tangent on this, but from my seat, wouldn't it be unbelievable if private equity, which is most of the money coming into this space versus venture capital, but there's some VC, if they all said to themselves, wait a minute, who are all the people that aren't getting into an IVF clinic? And why is that? Why aren't we pouring all this money into getting more insurance for a lot more people?
yeah.
And it's not a ton of money. Call me if you're listening to this. I will tell you what it's going to take. But I can also tell you that we're woefully underfunding our advocacy efforts in this space. And I look at that lack of investment and it tells me there isn't a real desire to see more coverage, right? It's that status quo question.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say that. And I am sure there's people out there who are sitting on a board of a company or a clinic who are saying, no, Barb, we want more people to get access. Well, then put your money where your mouth is, because the funding needed to make that happen is not a lot, but it's not there. And so same goes for the things that you guys see. And so I don't want to end on a down note, but what I want to say is this is fixable, right? We know what to do. We're smart. We have the experience. Like it's not as if we don't know. So it's about the will and the desire, and the resources have to kind of come together
Yes.
to make it. And again, this goes back to whatever that is that you're trying to quote unquote fix.
I think we say that all the time. We've said that a lot the last 8 weeks on the podcast, is like, we want to, there's so many people doing good in this space. And I would love to see more collaboration and advocacy for making the patient experience better. And I think sometimes if we just opened our ears and we listened to what each other had to say, I think that we can move the needle a lot faster than we are. And I think that's what, Ashley and I get very down on social media because of all of the, trends out there and the poor information that's being disseminated to patients. But on the flip side, it also is doing a lot of good. It's raising the voice that infertility is it's not just a women's problem, because I think that's always been the general assumption. But it touches everyone in some way, shape, or form. Going back to what I said, everybody knows somebody. And so I love that it's amplifying voices. And I hope if you're listening to this, and Ashley and I make a call, I think every week, like, please reach out to us. Like, we want to talk to you. We want to bring you on the podcast. We want your feedback on the things that we're talking about. Like, we want to make a difference. And we really want to make this podcast evidence-based and bring in, knowledgeable people to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. Please know, both of you, every conversation, every podcast episode is moving the needle. And if you get down, know you're doing the right thing. And this is, sadly, you won't know all the impact you're going to have. I say sadly because you kind of want to get some feedback, but please know you are making a huge difference, and we appreciate it so much.
Wow. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, thank you.
It means a lot.
Sometimes we feel like we're yelling into a void. So.
Yeah, we said that yesterday, actually. We're like, sometimes it feels like we're yelling into a void, but we got like a comment back from somebody and it was just like, oh my gosh, somebody's listening.
That's why we do it.
That's why we're doing this. Just one person listening and felt better about something. It just warmed our hearts. So
much.
Barb, obviously loved having you on here. Would love to give kind of closing moments for you to speak a little bit more about if somebody would like to work with you on Vital Voices Consulting, how does someone go about doing that? And I would love to just ask you just sort of a final question after that of if you could give one message to a listener, whether that's someone going through fertility treatment, somebody on the business side of things, whatever that would be, just to kind of close us out, kind of what would your end statement be for National Infertility Awareness Week?
I'm just really honored to be in this space and have had the experiences I have had. If you are a company, small, large, doesn't matter, and you are in some way, shape, or form touching the fertility or family building space, and you want to know, well, what can I do? What can we do? I want to have that conversation with you. I also want to just say, if you're already committed to doing some advocacy, but you don't have staff, I can be a fractional government affairs staff for you. I can help your organization get to that point, but it may take you a few years or a few months or whatever. But I want you to do it well, and I want you to do it right. And so, so that's something. And then I guess for National Infertility Awareness Week, I don't want us to get complacent. So I want to just, for everyone listening, my kind of final message is, keep asking yourself, how am I feeling about the status quo? And if I'm feeling like it's still not quite there, what can I do? And if you are unsure about what you can do, I would talk to your leadership of your organization. I would talk to the advocacy folks at Resolve or ASRM. There are any number of ways that, from a policy perspective, but we've also talked about just clinic operations and ways to advocate. SARP does a lot of clinic operations kinds of things. So please, 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 if the status quo is unacceptable to you, do something. Do something.
I love that.
Yeah.
Do something. That is what we should rename this episode.
We should.
It's true. Yeah.
Awesome. Barb, thank you so much for being on here. This was an amazing conversation. Yeah, I feel empowered too. So if Laura and I can ever do anything to help and support, and you hear of anything where we can get in front of people or advocate in our own right and amplify our voices more than we're already trying to do, please let us know on your end as well.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you again.
For those listening, please like, share, subscribe, comment if this resonated with you. Take action, send us a message, just do something. And doing that something, whether no matter how small you think it is, you will make a difference. It will move the needle forward. So yeah, thank you, Barb, for being here. And we'll see you all next week.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
If this conversation resonated, like, comment, or subscribe, share, send us your questions. Nothing is off limits. And wherever you are in your journey, know this: you deserve support that's real and human. Never forget to ask your questions, advocate louder, and remember, you're not crazy. Fertility is hard. That's it for today's episode of Fertility Nurses Unfiltered. Thanks for spending your time with us today. We'll see you next time.